Welcome. The Cowboy Spirit Radio Network is proud to present one of our premier programs. Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast. Program begins right now.
Welcome to the Cowboy Up Podcast. This is where talk is all about the West, the spirit of the West, and especially the people and personalities that make up the West. This is brought to you by White Stallion Ranch and Cowboy Spirit Radio Productions. Well, Russell, it's starting to get in here into Maine. It's starting to feel a little bit warmer.
Yeah, May's my favorite month. So
why is that?
I don't mind a little warmth, and sorry, I thought my sound was wrong. I like May because it's a little bit warm and the evenings are almost 100% dependable. The weather's very consistent. The next up is real heat, but it's not bad at all. I look forward to it every year, and it's pretty.
You tell me you like that real heat.
Well, I mean, I don't love August.
None of us do. None of us do.
Nobody loves August.
So, Russell, today's podcast is really going to be interesting. We've got a gentleman in, and he is local, and you've known him for a minute.
Yeah.
In fact, he knew your parents.
This
is literally the first person I have talked to that knew your mom and dad and worked with your mom and dad.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah. There's even a story behind that.
Oh, is there really? I'm going to want to hear that. And, our guest today is Dan Schneider, and he's a former first-team All-American baseball player. He ended up being a professional baseball player with the Braves and the Astros for a little bit more than a decade. He's got a very nice history, and I just want to bring him on. I'm going to let him talk to you about it. Dan, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Great to be here. Thank you very much.
I appreciate you coming in.
Love to talk to you.
Well, thanks. Well, I'll start out with a story because, I talk about White Stallion history a lot. And one of my standard stories is, I'm standing here, today I'm sitting here because of a blizzard in late spring Denver, Colorado, that was the tipping point that drove my father to come to Tucson and look for something to do. So that's kind of how life works. Well, the reason I know Dan Schneider is because my brother Michael had a problem driving at the speed limit for a while. And so he amassed a few driving tickets, and he was at an age where the insurance company didn't wish to have this race car driver driving range vehicles. So they were going to exclude him. And that really upset our father. And so he went to our broker, a good guy. We liked him a lot. And his name was Rudy. And my dad said, Rudy, and he blamed him for it. And my dad was a fair-minded guy, but he wasn't being very fair. And he said, you need to fix this. And he couldn't. And so our dad goes looking around. He says, who's the best property and casualty guy in Tucson? He asked his life insurance broker, health insurance broker, and they said, Dan Schneider. And so that's how we got to know Dan, because my brother was driving too fast when he was young.
Well, I lucked out, let's put it that way.
Well, we all lucked out. We all lucked out.
Able to solve a problem short term, which turned into a decades-long relationship with the White Stallion Ranch and with the True family.
Yeah.
And I got to say, it's one of the greatest relationships I've had in my insurance career, and has carried over into a whole another relationship having to do with dude ranchers in general. And been as far as my lifelong insurance practice, it's one of the most enjoyable groups to work with, and so one thing led to another.
I can believe that. I can believe that. I want to get to that, but I want to first talk about your baseball career, because as soon as I found out I got to do a podcast with you, I looked you up on the internet, because nobody can hide on the internet. And you got quite a history. I mean, I know when you played baseball at first team All-American is pretty remarkable. That's pretty high line right there.
Well, University of Arizona, a institution that forever has had a baseball program that's been above average, competitive, recognized nationally.
Yeah.
And I benefited from that. I was recruited out of Rincon High School here locally, given a scholarship. My father was on the faculty at the University of Arizona at the time, so the tuition that the scholarship paid was $150, and with books. And so I was a high expense recruit for the University of Arizona, but very fortunate, to say it that way.
And of course, once you got into school, the bookwork started, and I know that they worked you hard in the athletic program as well.
I'm not too sure we worked as hard as they do today, to be frank with you.
Really?
We played other sports. We actually went to school and went to class and that kind of thing. So Steve, while I enjoyed the benefit of having a top level program, a little different atmosphere than it is today. So
very much different, I would think.
Yes.
So now once you left the Bigs, you wanted to get into coaching. What happened with that?
Well, I had come out with the university with a degree in education, was going to be a high school coach, and started looking at the reality of having a family and 4 children at the time, and came quickly to the realization that I probably wasn't going to be able to maintain them as well as I would have liked to, and so started just looking at it and was actually given an opportunity to get into the insurance industry, the property casualty side of the insurance industry, and I got to say it's one of the other blessings of my life that I was able to do so, and it's been a very very profitable and beneficial practice for my family ever since then. So.
Now, I'm wondering, as getting into insurance, because insurance seems like it's a fairly boring occupation, and I don't think it has been in your case, has it?
Not really, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on insurance because I'm sure this podcast will die if I do. But no, it's a very especially when we're able to focus as we have in what's primarily commercial and industrial risks. It is a changing thing every day. It's a very legitimate vocation. You can do a lot of good with it. You can also benefit if it gets back to the same thing, basically working hard, being consistent, following up, those kinds of things. But yeah, it can be a great vocation.
So I know, Russell, you've got questions, or at least you've got something to say. I don't want to dominate this thing.
Oh no, well, I know. I will tell this story. Dan, because insurance is at times a pretty big challenge in dude ranching, and there was a period of time that some dude ranches went away in 1985 just because there was no insurance, and they couldn't, and so it's insurance is a little more volatile market than people think, and so I knew Dan pretty well because of the different aspects of being insured and being in the type business that we are, that have a lot of moving parts and a lot of different types of risks. So I got to know Dan pretty well, and then a friend of mine who started out like so many as a guest, and he'd moved to Tucson, and he said, I ran into a friend of yours, an insurance broker, Dan Schneider, and he knows you. And I said, yeah. And he goes, Well, you know, he was an All-American baseball player at University of Arizona, and he played the majors for over a decade. And I thought, no, I didn't know that. and I must have known Dan already 10 years by then, and I didn't even know he'd played for the U of A. And it's funny because the prior insurance broker was a pro football player, so but we knew that right away. But Dan, I didn't know that for 10 years. But Dan and I've even done business together. We're together now on the Dude Ranch Foundation, and insurance is at this scale. This isn't like buying a policy for your car or your home, which is sort of somewhat boilerplate. This is a bit of a moving target, and we were just talking insurance before we came in here, and ways to mitigate risk with the wildfire risks all around the West.
Well, one of the things, Russell, that I think I'd like to relate is that after working with you and the family, you introduced me to the Dude Ranch Association, to the DRA. Went to the first convention in 1998 in Palm Springs, I think it was.
Yeah.
And was introduced for the first time to the association itself, and that has evolved into a relationship with them ever since then. And about 5-6 years later, we were given a challenge to try to create a program within the DRA for what's called now horse safety. And tied to that horse safety program is an insurance, property casualty insurance program on behalf of the ranchers. But the great thing that evolved out of that whole program and that whole project was that what is it now, 20 years or so later, definitively produced ranches that are much safer, not only for themselves, but quite frankly for their guests.
Yeah, that's where it really matters.
That's right. And the actual results of injury and injury results in litigation for the DRA members is almost 35% less than the industry as a whole. And it has really been great to witness something that actually worked in that regard. And for me, it was an opportunity also to develop relationships with other ranches and to expand my practice with them. And so it's all one of those things, the kind of thing that in business I'd like to see, and those are win-win situations where both parties on both sides gain something out of it, and that's what's happened. So
I got to tell that story too. So it's a very long story, but the short version is Dan calls me up and says, well, you got an insurance inspector coming out to check you all out. She's going to be going through Arizona. And we'd had another one who was mildly offensive, but pretty mild. But this one comes in, and she professed a lot of knowledge about what we do, and she didn't have it. And she inspected us and Tanque Verde and some other Arizona ranches. And at the end, she went back with not suggestions, but requirements. And the requirements were different for particularly Tanque Verde and ourselves, who are fairly similar scale of program and run a fairly similar kind of thing. And she didn't apply her own made-up rules even the same. And I have a little temper problem periodically, and I was pretty upset. And so I went to Dan and I said, what are we going to do about this? And he goes, well, we'll get you through this. But we agreed that the absolute preeminent expert on recreational trail riding in the United States, maybe the world, is the Dude Ranchers Association. Just really unquestioned. So he said, let's create a program. Let's take this internal, and we'll all benefit. And so I was president at the time of the DRA. I took it to the association. They thought it was one of the worst ideas they'd ever heard. So that didn't work, but we came back a year later, a little more organized, a little more communication behind us, and it was then overwhelmingly accepted, and it's now everybody's favorite program. And the insurance company likes it so much they support it financially a little bit.
They do.
Support our documents and our productions.
Whatever, costs related to the whole program, which is unheard of, quite frankly, in the industry, but the results are there. And I should also add that as we go forward from year to year, the insurance company will want to come out and evaluate. And when they ask about what they should know about coming out and evaluating White Stallion Ranch, I said, well, let me tell you about Russell True first of all, and we go from there. So that way they're forewarned as to what to ask and what not to ask.
They're prepared. They are prepared.
That's right.
Okay, so one of the numbers you threw out just a minute ago was about 35% decrease in accidents.
Less frequency.
Less frequency, okay. And I've got to think that chases through to the Dude Ranch's costs. Like you said, guest safety, but I think it probably also benefits the vacationer because it probably results in probably a lower fee that they pay to be at the Dude Ranch. I think it's a win-win-win.
Well, that'd be a question for Russell.
There you go.
Because I don't set his rates.
No, I understand that.
But any insurance costs or whatever all enter into a balance sheet or profit and loss at some point.
Sure.
So certainly.
And Dan always says to me, and then we'll take a break. He says, I'm more worried about your vehicles because they're out on a road where you don't have complete control over your own destiny out there. Same thing can be said on a horse because you're on an animal that's bigger, faster, stronger, has his own mind. But there is an equine law that recognizes that horses have inherent risk attached to them. And as long as you're doing your job correctly at a dude ranch, that law is probably protecting you. So I don't even think of it that way. I think of it purely and simply as, and we preach this to our wranglers. Let's not think about liability. Let's not think about insurance. That's an issue for us and other people to worry about. Let's just worry about our guests. And if we worry about our guests and we're engaged and we're thinking and we're following our instincts, we're going to keep those bad outcomes minimized. And I think if you start there, I'm one of the instructors in this program, and that's one of the points I always make. Let's as wranglers and people on the ground making this stuff happen, let's just worry about those guests and make them our foremost thought, and we're gonna make things the best they can be. But anyway, on that little preaching moment, we'll take a break.
Here at White Stallion Ranch, we're absolute believers in what Golden Wings horseshoes can do for horses. And our latest example is my wife, Laura, was watching this horse on whatever she saw it on, some sort of social media for sale, and this very pretty little Palomino mare was a roping horse, rodeo type roping horse, and the horse was sort of reasonably priced, so it got Laura's attention, but it was still a little too much. And so she just kind of kept watching, and the price dropped, and so then she ran out to take a look at this horse, and she talked to the owner before, and he had said, well, it's a really nice, well-trained horse, can really rope, but she does get sore after a few runs, and I need something that'll go a little longer and do more runs than what she's able to do. So Laura went out and looked at the horse, and sure enough, just as described, the horse, was a little sore, and the more you worked her, she would get sorer. So Laura bought her, and of course she didn't pay a whole lot of money for the horse because it was a little bit sore, and she brought it back, And I said, well, you bought the horse? And she goes, yeah, she's a little bit sore. It kind of work related, but Golden Wings is going to fix this problem. And so get those on her tomorrow, please. And so sure enough, I put the Golden Wings on the horse. Very pretty Palomino. Came with the name Barbie. And so she's still Barbie because it fits. And we put the Golden Wings on her and gave her a couple of weeks just to get her feet sort of back right and get the inflammation reduced. And then went to work, and the mare just gets better and better, and work makes her better. And Golden Wings has made all that possible.
Okay, we're back with Dan Schneider. Dan, you started to tell me a story about Russell's mom and the Marlboro group, and I stopped you because I don't want to waste this stuff. This is, like I said, I've never heard any stories about Russell's parents. I've read a lot about it, but I've never heard stories about him. You got stories, I want to hear them.
Well, for me, this resonates with one of the ultimate goals of the DRA and the DRF, and that's the preservation of the West, of the preservation of the cowboy and the Western experience. And it was what is that 20 years ago now at this point, the Marlboro thing?
Yeah, I would think. I mean, I think it probably, I would say almost exactly, actually.
And the Marlboro Company had developed their theme being the cowboy, and all of their advertising, their bulletins, everything showed a Rough Rider or cowboy on a horse, and
100%,
and all that. And related to that theme, they were awarding vacations to guest ranches, both in the northern ranches and the southern ranches, and they selected White Stallion as the prospect of being their southern ranch, and part of their corporate approach to that was to come in and do things, change things with the ranch, change how things look to what they thought it should be, and renovate things, different themes, if you will. And while this was all well and good, and Michael and Russell thought this was an opportunity, Cynthia True was the one who had to be convinced of that opportunity. And Cynthia, shall I say, wasn't exactly embracing the idea because she felt that maybe it changed things from the true West and what the True family had envisioned it to be and carried on for it to be. And so I think it was a Sunday afternoon, I was invited to be present at a presentation made by executives from the Marlboro Company to Cynthia True, trying to convince her that it was a good thing, it was the right thing to do. And I can remember this day, throughout the presentation, a very stoic expression on her face that never changed through the entire presentation and thereafter. And I walked out away from that saying, I wonder if this is even going to take place, because I don't find that Cynthia's embracing it exactly, and it's going to be her call. Well, the rest is history. Michael and Russell finally convinced her, and as it's turned out, and I would like to think I never talked to her about it after, she was very happy with the way things turned out, and the ranch was truly enhanced, I think, by what Marlboro did, and they did stay, as far as I could tell anyway, with the theme and the true meaning of things, whether it's a picture, whether it's a statue, whether it's the decorations, whatever it is, or of the ranch itself, and truly, with that, I think Russell and Michael took the ranch to a different level, and they've taken it to a different level ever since then. So that's the story, if you will.
That's
Steve.
a great story. That is a great story, and I know, I the term I use frequently is little hinges swing big doors. And if you look at this just started as something, and you didn't know whether she was even on board with it. Exactly. And it ended up being she was on board. And look what Michael and Russell between them, and Cynthia and Marlboro all got together, and they created something that I know has brought many, many hours of enjoyment to the people that come here and get to spend time at White Stallion. Well, pretty remarkable.
It's sort of the icing on that little cake is first of all, our mother, if she were alive, she would love that description of her. She would love that word stoic, and she would love the fact that her expression didn't change. She'd be proud of herself. She wouldn't say it, but she'd be very pleased. But she did say to us later, after that, she said, well, we can go ahead, but you realize we're prostituting ourselves. And she meant it exactly like that. And she was not for exaggeration or hyperbole. But when I was negotiating the deal, I was the one who signed it and we sat and agonized, the three of us, my mother, my brother, and I, on the price. We gave them this price. We thought, well, we can probably back off it a little. And I was talking to the CFO of the project, and he goes, I don't think you quite appreciate what you're in for. He goes, I think we better raise that about 50%. So I went back to my mother with that news. I said, man, I'm an amazing negotiator, Mom. He raised this 50% on his own. And so that sort of rubbed some salve on the wound. She never participated in it. Some of it offended her. It was just emotional, and she realized that because they redecorated us. And Dan's 100% right. Took us to a new level. You need those outside eyes. They had them. I will say in Marlboro's defense, in Marlboro, it was a long 5.5 years we did that. And it was a lot of work, and it was at times pretty painful. But they are obsessed, and this is a word I carefully use, obsessed with authenticity. So none of those Marlboro men that anybody has ever seen in any ad ever is not a real deal cowboy. And anything they do better be real. We've done Marlboro commercials. We did 5.5 years of being a Marlboro ranch. If it ain't real, don't even talk to them. And they have one of the most, I don't know with cigarettes today, but at the time it was one of the 3 most valuable brands in the world, and they weren't going to weaken in its defense or defending its future. So, yeah, I'm nothing but good to say. They took us to another level. Dan got it right, and it gave us a platform to build on, both economically and every other way.
And you look at them being cigarette company and, all the negative press that cigarette companies have, but, this is America. I think we have freedom of choice, don't we?
Absolutely.
Last time I checked. Mm-hmm. So I love that story. I really appreciate you guys sharing it. You don't hear that story very often.
No, and totally unrelated to that, I worked for Marlboro in Germany for a month or so, and it was something my good friend Ken Neal put together for me, and it was fun. But I told him up front, I don't smoke, never have, never will, and they said, "Oh, we don't care. You're a cowboy, right?" I said, "Well, play one at the."
I would say.
So anyway,
okay, Dan. Something you and I talked about, and we went on and on with this, I think we could probably still be talking about it, is your work with the Dude Ranch Foundation. You've been there, I think, longer than your baseball career, longer than 10 years with the Dude Ranch Foundation. So there must be something about it you love. Why don't you talk about that?
Well, the Dude Ranch Foundation is a branch, if you will, or the foundation for the DRA. And it's a nonprofit, 501(c)(3). When it has been established, it's actually with another name, a long time, awarding scholarships primarily to college level students going to school in different acumens for their related to somewhere to not only ranching but dude ranching and the industry in general. But a few years ago, a group of us who were on the board envisioned an opportunity to try to grow that foundation to the level that it could be self-sustaining and at the same time expand, if you will, the activities. I mean, it's always been part of the mission, but actually activities in addition to awarding scholarships. Russell, can you elaborate? Why don't you elaborate on the other aspects of the mission of the Dude Ranch Foundation right now?
Well, as you started to say, and you and I were part, and really sort of you came to me and said, I wasn't even on the board at the time, I'd been on, but I was off, and you said, this is the Dude Ranch Educational Trust, focused entirely on scholarships. We'd taken over the horse safety because that was the way it best worked, and we'd then bought the building in Cody and built the museum, and so it was beyond an educational trust. It was, and so we were part of the group that changed the name to Dude Ranch Foundation, and to express in its name a broader set of goals. So the mission is to educate both internally, such as horse safety, wildfire mitigation, and educate the public on dude ranches and dude ranch history. We do that mainly through our museum. We publish a magazine. We have outreach. We're working unofficially with a PBS, Wyoming, Montana PBS documentary that's going to, it's essentially inspired by the 100th anniversary of the Dude Ranch Association. It's not directly tied to that, but we're working very hard to support that with resources, people, access to ranches. So education, both in the form of scholarships. We continue to give scholarships. I think we've got 16 or 18 applicants in the flow right now. Education internally, externally, land preservation. We work real hard with our ranchers to help them facilitate ways that they might be able to protect their land and keep it undeveloped for the future. And just continue to protect the heritage and history of dude ranching, which, obviously I'm a dude rancher, so I believe it, but dude ranching has a far bigger role in the West history and formation and early days than people know. And so we like to get that word out.
And that's part of the reason I wanted to talk about this a little bit today, if you don't mind, an unpaid commercial, and that has to do with the listeners to this podcast and people that love guest ranches that come back as guests on a regular year. Please make yourself available to, or not available, but acquaint yourself with the foundation. All the ranches that you go to have information about the foundation, and if you're so inclined, it could be an opportunity to support a nonprofit that is, first of all, seeking to maintain the experience that you have at the ranches, but also to help with conservation, to help with again primarily maintaining the legacy, and would urge you to find out and learn about that, because your hosts at the ranches would be happy to tell you. So.
Right. And
Yeah.
we're starting to see Dan's, and I'm going to give a lot of credit to Doug Van Berkom. He's both one of the visionaries, and he also has a lot of experience in this sort of realm. We've had 2 large gifts come in lately, and it's a long way from the ultimate goal, but it's really proved to us that our goal of having a $3 to $5 million endowment and self-sustaining without, just having to fundraise every year for another year's set of scholarships, etc. We really see it there now, and so the foundation is truly that. It's not, it's a perfect sister, brother, sibling to the Dude Ranchers Association, which is a 100-year trade organization, one of the oldest trade organizations in the West, and their job is to get the word out on dude ranching and self-police and do all the good things they do. But the Dude Ranch Foundation is purely to do the things we're talking about. We have that beautiful museum right across from Buffalo Bill's Hotel. And that's not a hotel named for Buffalo Bill. That is Buffalo Bill's Hotel. So we love that they do what they do.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
Yeah, and it's you give back a lot. Something I wanted to touch on, and I think it's really important. Tucson is the number one industry in Tucson is tourism, and no argument about that. And I listen to Russell talk about how many dude ranches were initially here and how many dude ranches are here now. The number is very different. And I know that you have been very active in promoting Tucson. And in fact, I think you were one of the first people to help bring spring training for baseball here, weren't you?
Well, that was 1946, and I was 4 years old at the time. So
I didn't work with that. You were progressive, Steve, for being 4.
But no. In 1993, the Cleveland Indians, who had been here since 1946, decided to leave to new digs in Homestead, Florida, and a group of us were identified as possibly being in a position to try to help replace them, and we were fortunate enough. The timing was perfect. The Colorado Rockies had been awarded a new expansion franchise, and we were immediately made contact with them, and it was almost a natural for them to come to Tucson from being a Western team as opposed to Florida, come to Arizona and to Tucson. We had a facility for them. We renovated it, and were able to get them to come. And then 5 years later, we're in a position to attract another expansion team. It was called the Arizona Diamondbacks.
I've heard of them.
And the Jerry Colangelo, who was then one of the original owners of the Diamondbacks, was great friends with Jerry Reinsdorf, who's the owner of the Chicago White Sox, and convinced Jerry to move from Florida to Tucson. So at one point we had 3 teams here, and what's behind this, Steve, is all having to do, and for us was and always still is, the economic benefit and related to tourism of having Major League Baseball here. And it was quite an era. That era ended in 2014 when the walking stick resort and development was established in Scottsdale, attracted the teams from here up there. Quite frankly, as far as Major League Baseball is concerned, having all 15 teams, in Maricopa County makes all the sense in the world because of the economics and the efficiencies, if you will. And so while we bemoan the fact, it was also from a business standpoint understandable.
Absolutely.
We've been back trying to reestablish that ever since then, unsuccessfully until this year, and we were able to again collaborate with Major League Baseball and bring an aspect or a component of the World Baseball Classic, which has been developed in the last 10 years, and the last couple of years has really been high profile. They have every 3 years a qualifying event, and this year we were able to host that qualifying event here in Tucson earlier in March. And it's the first step, hopefully, if you will, in reestablishing the relationship and the presence of MLB. Again, all driven by the opportunity it presents to everybody economically. People coming into the community from out of state, out of the city, to stay at hotels, visit our restaurants, a few stay at guest ranches. But overall, that's what it's all about. And hopefully a first step in reviving and reestablishing that. 5 years from now or so, it's anticipated that Major League Baseball will expand again, and two of the teams that are two of the cities that are possibly in a position to gain that expansion are Salt Lake City and Portland, Oregon, both western cities, and Tucson is sitting with a perfectly competitive Major League spring training facility in Keno, and so the end game hopefully is to be in a position when that happens to attract that team and actually have a full spring training schedule here again. So that's the long history, I guess, of that whole area, and hopefully we'll be successful again as an economic driver.
It's incredibly important, and when you bring those people in for those games, even the college games, they leave behind money, which leaves behind jobs, which means people get fed.
Well, tourism, is it number one or number two? Where's the copper industry at this point?
Still I don't know. That's you have the 5 C's: copper, cattle, cotton, citrus, climate. I think climate meaning tourism. So I think it's. I'm sure it's number one.
Yeah. Okay.
So, Dan, you're working on some other stuff that's too preliminary to talk about. But your role, along with Blake Eager, the chairman with the Southern Arizona Sports Tourism Film Authority, a state-sanctioned group. You've got several irons in the fire that could really, in those 3 main areas, which are big, sports, tourism, and film. You've got some other stuff working that could, again
attract
really
people
help
to the community outside of Major League Baseball. Yes, and we think we have, and I want to say this: the authority is a real opportunity, I think, for this community, is because it's not just Tucson, it's all the southern counties. It's the Southern Arizona Sports Tourism and Film Authority. All the 6 southern counties in Arizona are to participate in it. So the events and the types of things that can be developed are not just Tucson, not just baseball, and I think that bodes well, hopefully, for the authority, because it's broader based, and it's not just Pima County. So, yeah.
Right. Well, and those are huge economic drivers. I finished with Dan honored me by when he was very belatedly inducted into the University of Arizona Sports Hall of Fame, which is a pretty big deal in Southern Arizona, or in Arizona in general. He invited me, and I listened to the finest acceptance speech I've ever heard in any realm, and where he talked about his teammates and never spoke about himself, talked about the coaches, and talked about, I think he was the only one on the team that went Major League, and all these other guys who found also really important lives and success in whatever they went into, and it was just the best speech that I'd ever heard. So
I practiced it for about 3 months, and finally was able to deliver it. Well, I appreciate that, but you have to keep things in perspective, and there's no doubt that baseball is a team game, and no matter how individually successful you might be, and you're still have to thank and be reliant on guys behind you. I never can quote the exact stats, but I hold a record for the single season strikeout record at the University of Arizona, and that was like 184 strikeouts. But the number of putouts for all the games I was in was, 300? So another 120 of those, the guys behind me made the outs, and that's just an illustration in my mind of and the reason why I started out, thanking those guys for helping me get to where I was able to go. So anyway.
Well, it was a great speech, and it was fun and funny, and anybody who was listening should have taken away a lesson.
Dan, thank you very much.
Well,
This has actually been a great podcast. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Thanks.
Thank you. Russell, every time I sit with someone like Dan, he's done so many things and he's done them all well. And he took a little kernel of something and he nurtured it and he worked his tail off and got into areas he didn't know about, and he made it up as he went along and he figured it out. And I look at all the different people and organizations that have benefited, the students that got the scholarships, the dude ranches that got the insurance and the horse and safety programs, the horses that were better off, the riders that were better off, vacations, wonderful vacations that people had because of people like Dan and their vision and working with people like you and Michael to accomplish these things. It's what's one of the great things about being in business, and I really appreciate you having Dan in.
Well, Dan sells a product everybody needs and nobody likes. And despite that, he's done it so well, so long, and done everything he's done so well. He's one of those people I aspire to be, because I talk to people like Tom Tracy, a very respected local guy who's been involved in a lot of these things Dan does for our community, and Blake Eager and some of his other guys he's worked with on these baseball efforts and all these sometimes really hard struggles. And everybody talks about how Dan's reputation within Major League Baseball, even though it was a long time ago that he played, he can call up these presidents of these teams, these owners. He can go to any MLB meeting and Dan's here. And that is the result of not being Mickey Mantle. It's a result of living a lifelong ethical, moral, hardworking, good life. I didn't say it well, but it's just a life well lived, and he's the result of it, and all these doors he opens, because they're still dragging him out of wherever he's trying to rest every now and then to go do these crazy things. This is hard work, and Tucson and Pima County don't make it easy sometimes. So this is a tribute to somebody who's done it right for a lifetime.
So it's like somebody else said, once he finds his way out, they drag him back in.
Yeah, they'll drag him in forever.
Well, that's a wrap, folks, and thank you for being a part of the Cowboy Up Podcast, coming your way from the White Stallion Ranch in Tucson, Arizona. My name is Stan. I'm the radio man, and it's my privilege and my pleasure as a part of What It Takes Radio and the Cowboy Spirit Radio Network to bring this program to you. And thank you, Russell. Thank you, Stephen. And thank you, Dan. More stories and ventures of some of the good people and the good things, and sometimes the wild and crazy things that happen in the Western way of life. Hey, why don't you think about making your way to the White Stallion Ranch here in Tucson, Arizona? It truly is a historic place, a place of adventure for family, friends, family reunions, and even business conferences. Please check us out at whitestallion.com, whitestallion.com. We'd love to hear from you. How about a recommendation, a review, a suggestion? Perhaps you have something we could do better for you or do with you. We'd love to hear from you. So reach out to us at the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com, the Cowboy Up Podcast at gmail.com. Take care. That's right. Ride safe, walk tall, be kind and good to one another, do good work, and make sure that the world's just a little bit better place because you came and did your life a little bit of the cowboy way. Take care and bye for now.